1880, but that was also African American, and that was established by J.J. Daniel, the guy who created Evergreen Cemetery. So Phoenix was actually an extension of Springfield. So it was historically white, and this is something you can tell in architecture here. You can look at architecture of homes and kind of tell which neighborhoods were black and white historically. So originally there was this portion of this area is called East Springfield. Then the streetcar was built through this area. You get the Great Fire in 1901. The streetcar system opens up Phoenix Park, which is like an amusement park just north, almost in Panama Park. And the wife of the streetcar owner named it Phoenix Park because Phoenix, like the rising after the ashes of the Great Fire. So that eventually became this area's name. When you get to like the 1890s, the first decade of the 20th century, you start to see a lot of industrial development too. So when my dad came to town, his first job here was at the Alton Box Mill, which is like the paper mill down the street. So, you know, that was kind of introduction, but that was one of the earliest industries that came in this area. Really got a big boost when the port opened up in 1916. And so ever since then, you've had a lot of that type of industrial development. With Southeast Toyota is that was originally our Muir Packing Company, which was a slaughterhouse based out of Chicago. They made 15,000 pounds of sausage every day, slaughtering cows and pigs and sheep, and all the cattle was shipped in by boat. So it's a lot of that story that still floats around today. Talleyrand Port Terminal is a result of that. What's always interesting to me is when you dig back into that black history, you see what's going on before there was a Jacksonville. You still see those occupations here today. So we're talking longshoremen, industries like that. It's always been around here. And really, like, you know, this area to me, the Durkeeville area, Moncrief, all that to me is really authentic Jacksonville. Because I mean, once you get out to the south side, back in the old days, that was turpentine woods, that was forest, that was lumber. The development you see in those areas is really any place USA. If you want to experience true Jacksonville, these are the areas where you see that. So it's really important to preserve that. This is a very unique area in terms of all of Florida. My family comes from South Carolina. My great-granddad was a root doctor, followed the railroad tracks down to Florida. And while I was a root doctor, he dropped the baby off at every city. So I got cousins all across the state.
That sounds like my daddy.
Probably related, you know. So I got cousins all across the state, and I've actually had meetings like this in Miami, and you start talking, somebody say something, you're like, where are you from in South Carolina? Find out your cousin. So, but I mentioned that to say that I travel around for my work a lot. I have a lot of family in different places, so I spend a lot of time in different places. In Jacksonville, this neighborhood in particular, very unique, not just in Florida, but across the South. And so there's a lot of economic opportunity here that we can all take advantage of to make sure that the community does prosper in place. And as we talk about things like affordable housing, in the grand scheme of things, what we really want to do is raise all income levels and be able to pass generational wealth down to our kids, our grandkids, and things in future generations. And when you have a seat at the table, at the decision-making table, it means you control how that happens. So I can take any questions around history or urban planning or public policy, but that's generally the approach I take to all plan on working. What I do is the first thing you do is there's nothing new under the sun. You look at the past. The past will tell you a lot of what you need to know. And then it's just a matter of looking at today's current conditions and public policies and understanding that those policies were generally written in spite of us or against us. But by the same token, if we know how those policies work, we just switch them around and they can work for us. So I'll just shut up now. I won't talk too long, but see if anyone has any questions.
I got a question. While I was passing out flyers the other day, this couple asked me about J. Ellen Axman School. And I think she was telling me something about a meeting that they had. I told her that I was not aware of it, but I would research it. And she wanted to know what was they gonna do with it, what they was gonna bring there.
Okay, so J. Allen Axon, I don't know about that meeting. I do know kind of what they're planning to do. They reached out a while back. Some group has bought that. They want to do some form, well, last year they were talking about a hotel or something like that. Boutique hotel, and they had some self-storage or something behind it. You know, that's kind of what I heard. My advice to them at that point, or not really advice,
Yeah,
just
but I was
my,
gonna call the planning, I guess,
Yeah.
department with the city to see what was going on.
you could call the planning department, or just reach out to I think it's Brett James. He's the new planning director.
Okay.
Or since that is actually, they just landmarked that recently. So that's probably what you're talking about.
Yeah, cause I didn't know anything.
Yeah, so they landmarked it. Most likely they landmarked it because that will help trip into some incentives on the preservation side. And so they're probably trying to capital stack funds to make the numbers work. But that's the meeting. The meeting was a locally landmarked designation. It's like 2 or 3 weeks ago.
So when they landmark it, can they change the structure of it? Or can
When you landmark it, it really locks you into protecting what's there.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
then, yeah.
I just wanted to comment. They landmarked it because they found out that it was the second public school and that Richard L. Brown was the first
Yeah.
African American that architecture school. So that's how it got its landmark.
Yeah, and I mean, so yeah, R.L. Brown was, he's the first known black architect who was here, and he's from the neighborhood too, right down the street.
So down his house.
So down the house, yeah.
And it was a nice house.
Yeah.
So when we was in 5th grade, it was his niece stayed of his house.
Yeah.
And it was a nice house. They tore it
Where
down.
the bus was there.
Seriously?
It is a bus now.
But yeah, so that is some of his work, and that's probably that and Edward Waters. That may be two of his larger work standing. I know he just tore another house down on Florida Avenue like a year or two ago. That was his. So yeah, we've been trying to designate and locally landmark a lot of our history, because in the past it just comes down real quick. You would never know, like the Hurston Flower Shop, but you never see that in Riverside, and San Marco, and Springfield, and that's because they've used the policies in a way that protect themselves.
When they start developing Florida area, and all the people staying around Florida area, and all over, they got those houses, and what's going to happen to them?
So ideally, you want to protect people. So right now we're looking at trying to do a culturally appropriate zoning overlay to protect the residents that are there from future outside development coming in. But that's where I go back to, if the policies were set up against the community in the beginning, we got to tweak them before the development starts to happen. Because if you don't do that, then what happened to LaVille or what happened to Brooklyn, that happened.
They closed a lot of schools, and they probably still closing schools. How could I would be able to take Long Branch?
Organization and opposition. So voiceful opposition, because Long Branch is on their list of door now.
Ooh,
Yeah.
no.
And if
Oh, I wasn't gonna mention something about that. I had another.
because originally back when they first started talking about shutting down schools or redoing schools, Matthew Gilbert was on that too.
Yes.
But there was vocal organization that stopped that
That's right.
from happening. So the Long Branch, that plan they just passed, it is in their plan to eventually close Long Branch and demolish that school. So this community would have to just be vocal in making sure that doesn't happen. And then you can get ahead of them and do what they did with R. Brown, landmark the school, and
Yes.
you can't do it.
That's right.
So that's how you use the policy to stop stuff like
Yeah, we
that. Yes.
Oh, so I wanted to circle back, connecting what you're saying about the policy, and then to you, Melanie, about something that we can probably add to this. Not saying adding, but where does it fit in with being strategic about like knowledgeable sessions on civic engagement in these communities, because I don't think that all generations understand the severity of true civic engagement, and so we cannot just wait till like presidential elections to talk about voting and rights and how those things impact policy. That's connected to what you mentioned about the budgeting and the funding you get. Sometimes depending on who is over those, those monies and allocations, that has a direct impact on how much funding you get, how much funding the other CDCs get. And I think that that should be included somewhere, even if it's not its own cluster or pillar, it should be included somewhere.
Thank you. I agree, Randy.
And I mentioned while you're here, we're working on a Durkeeville study, so some of the things you mentioned may overlap, but I know in the way things are going that with that particular community in terms of revitalization talk, we're looking at ways that we're talking about capacity building and investing in the local organizations there.
Yeah.
And a lot of that's going to be hand-holding too. So it's
Yeah.
not just a workshop, but just sitting down and helping businesses, residents, community organizations, hand on hand with the intent of all these organizations. Money and stuff is out there. It's just a matter of how you tap into it and knowing how to tap into it. So if we can empower our own community organizations, a lot of the things we're talking about, affordable housing, some of these things have to take care of themselves when the people in the neighborhood are doing the work. I go by the words of H.J. Russell, Herman J. Russell, one of the largest black real estate development firms in the country in Atlanta. His whole thing for revitalization of black neighborhoods said it was easy. You create 5 black millionaires within that neighborhood and everything else takes care of itself. So I'm a big believer in investing in people in the community, paying people within the community to do their own work. People know the neighborhood better than anybody else. And all these other issues will start to resolve themselves as the power rises and influence increases.
Do you know anything about the webinar that they had for historical grants that you can apply for through Tallahassee?
Can you tell that? So, not about the webinar, but I can tell you what that is.
Okay.
I didn't watch the webinar, but I know what it is. So, if you're going to apply for historical grants through the state, you're probably talking about special category or small matching grants. Both of those cycles roll around. The application window typically opens in April and closes in June. So what they just did, they just went through and graded out all the applications. I actually talked to Ruben Acosta the day he heads that division. He was telling me that whatever the number is, every application was rated above 80. And so they were hoping that the state was going to fund every application that came in this year. So for you, I guess it would mean as the next cycle rolls around, you almost want to start working on things now, and so that it's in line. A portion of out east is Main Street. So the Main Street area, if you apply for a small matching grant, it waives that matching fee. Other areas have to match either financially or in kind. And then the special categories is typically a larger grant program for rehabilitation of larger structures. But that's just a state, because when you get into June and July, the National Park Service and the National Trust Service, larger grants run after American history. And I know that Mount Olive A&E has been working on some of those too. Yeah.
Question.
No. Yes.
Do you know how far they're in the process as it pertains to Long Branch?
Tearing it down or closing it?
Either or.
I don't know when they plan to. I just know I was looking in their plan for the Durkeeville stuff, and I saw Long Branch and theirs being closed and demolished. I just don't know the year.
Do you have the proper procedure for getting it landmarked?
Oh, I mean, get a landmark. Go down to the plan department, historic preservation office. You would fill out a local landmarking form and what you want to do. is you'll work with the Historic Preservation Office. Then that has to go before the Jacksonville Historic Preservation Commission. If a property owner agrees, which means it's Duval Public Schools, which they probably wouldn't agree because they're gonna tear it down. If they agree, they would have to meet 2 of 7 landmarking criteria. If they oppose, if the property owner opposes, the property has to meet 4 of the 7 criteria. So there are lots of examples of people putting forward nominations, the property owner opposing, JEA Tower being one of them. First Baptist Church a few years ago, they wanted to tear a building down in downtown. Downtown applicants opposed, JHPC locally landmarked the structures, and those projects changed, the building's still there. So that's how you would go about doing it if the school board didn't agree.
So anybody could do this?
Anybody, yeah?
So if they wanted to tear the school down, and what would be the reason for tearing it down, or what would you put in its place?
Nothing. So
So you bare land?
it'd be bare land, yeah, it'd be bare land. So, and it's frustrating for me. So that's why I kind of just,
Yeah.
but,